Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. It's December 11th, 2022, and Morocco just won in the quarterfinals to advance to the World Cup semifinal against its former colonial power, France. I'm definitely rooting for Morocco in this game that's going to be happening in a couple of days because I love the message it sends that we may have been colonized, but we can still do great things. And I think that's a great lesson for not just countries, but for individuals too, who kind of look at the rearview mirror and look at their life and say, oh my God, my life is so terrible, all because of what happened to my childhood. Same thing happens when people talk about colonialism. So let's hope that they kick France's ass. I would love that. Anyway, this episode features Palle Bo, host of the Radio Vagabond podcast. You'll love it. It's a short episode, and be sure to check out and subscribe to his podcast called Radio Vagabond. In fact, the latest episode features yours truly. Enjoy. Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. In this episode, I've got an awesome guest. It's Palle Bo of the Radio Vagabond podcast, one of my favorite podcasts I actually listen to. Palle, it's an honor to be with you today here at TBEX.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's so rare that I meet somebody who actually taps me on the shoulder and say, "Oh, are you Palle Bo?" Right. So I felt like a superstar.
Rock star, yeah,
I felt like a rock star, and it's
well, you are a rock star for our little niche industry of travel podcasts. Yeah. There's not too many people like that.
Yeah, actually, my response when you said you listen to the podcast, I say, "Oh, you're the one."
Exactly right. The one guy who listens to your podcast. Yeah. So, but of course, as famous as you are, some of my listeners will not be familiar with you. So why don't you tell everybody briefly what the Radio Vagabond podcast is?
Yeah, I'm a full-time traveler. I'm from Denmark. I 6 years ago I sold everything and just started living out of my suitcase and traveling around the world and documenting my journey on my podcast, The Radio Vagabond.
Why did you make that tough decision? Or maybe it wasn't a tough decision 6 years ago. What was the inflection point?
It was that I have two kids, and when the youngest graduated and moved out of the house, I thought, okay, now is my window to travel until they, quote unquote, start producing grandchildren for me at some point. I want to be back and a part of that. But I thought I'd lived in the same kind of rural part of Denmark all my life, and I thought, okay, that's not going to be on my tombstone that he lived in Randers all his life. So I was toying with the idea of living abroad for 2 years, thought about moving to Cape Town that I heard so much good about, and I went there just to try it out, and that's when I realized I can work anywhere. So even though I love Cape Town and I want to go back many, many times, there's so many other places on the planet. So that's when I started, maybe I should travel around the world for 2 years. And now I've been doing it for 6 years, and I just got a new passport with more pages. So yeah, I intend to keep on traveling.
So your goal is to hit all the countries of the world, right?
Yeah, it's kind of my goal. Yeah. Okay. Let's see if it happens. If I'm 95 and still need 20 countries to go, I can still say it's still my dream. I'll get there.
And where are you at right now?
I'm on 105.
Okay, and so you roughly have about 90 or so to go. What's the region that you're kind of weakest in?
I have never been to Australia, New Zealand, that whole...
It doesn't count. It's just like, who cares about that?
It's really
it's high. It's down under for a reason.
Yeah,
we call it down under because it's like down and we forgot.
It's down under, but it's high up on my bucket list. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope to go there after TBEX Thailand and kind of, okay, now I'm east, so let's see if I can make it south from there.
Okay. And one of the things that you do is kind of fun is that you're like in a taxi cab, you're driving around and you're recording everything. I mean, so many people are vloggers, but you are capturing the audio for people who love to like hear the sounds and everything.
Yeah.
You talk to locals everywhere you go.
I think what I aim for is that people can close their eyes and see what I'm seeing. I'm trying to describe it, but the little subtle sound effects of the scooters, the horns of the scooters of Hanoi, or the mosque in the background when I'm in Morocco,
or the chicken in Kenya.
Exactly, and when I had a house sit in rural Texas, I lived right next to a rooster farm. So those kind of things, even the little insects and the languages that people speak in the background when I'm walking a market, you can kind of hear that. So yeah, I feel that sounds, they really paint a picture as well. And I do the occasional interview. I try not to do it online. I want to meet people face to face, like you and me here.
Right. No, it makes a big difference. I'm focusing a lot on Africa lately. And you've been to several African countries. I'm not sure exactly how many, but
16, I think.
16, right? So quite a few. What surprised you most when you visited the African continent, or maybe certain countries that kind of you just weren't expecting?
Yeah, when we're thinking of Africa, maybe we tend to think, it's all more or less the same. But there's a huge difference from Morocco to Burundi.
Right.
It's like day and night. And even between Burundi and Rwanda in Central Africa, they are kind of the same, small size, and they are so different. Rwanda is the safest country in Africa and so clean. I was blown away.
I like to call it the Switzerland of Africa.
Yeah, or the Japan, because it's so clean. You don't even see a cigarette butt on the street. It's so clean and very safe. And then Burundi they don't get many tourists, and that is the poorest country in the world. So
is
close.
It the poorest? I thought it was the DRC.
According to when I was going there, by
GDP per capita.
I asked Siri,
maybe
what is the poorest country in the world?
And
she
stepped
said,
in it. When you stepped in it, the GDP per capita just dropped.
It could be the thing. Yeah, but I felt very different there, and people were looking at me and, what's he doing here? And the kids I was walking at some point then on the street, and there were 3 or 4 small kids around me, and they just grabbed my hand because they thought it was so interesting that I would walk there. And
Now you have a background in radio, and is that kind of what was the reason for why you wanted to get into podcasting?
Yeah, I started in radio in '85, and I started in my first podcast in 2006, 2 years after podcasting was invented. And I thought actually I was a late mover on that. But when I started traveling, being able to paint pictures with audio, it was so natural for me. I mostly started the podcast for myself, the 95-year-old Palle Bo who's not traveling anymore, so that I can relive my trip. But yeah, I tried. I enjoy doing it, and it's my passion, it's my hobby, and also my job. So I never worked a day in my life.
I want to ask you about some of the advantages and disadvantages of podcasting and traveling and recording audio, but I would say that one of the biggest advantages, and I don't take advantages because I do a little bit more video, but it's that I think that people are far more likely to be transparent and honest and blunt on an audio format. When you're interviewing a local, they'll tell you exactly what they think, much more than if you're putting a video camera in their face, because then all of a sudden it feels more intrusive. Because you feel more anonymous when somebody's just putting a microphone on your face.
And even a microphone can be a little bit intimidating because now I'm being recorded.
Right. But much less than a video.
Yeah, but I feel that's one of my kind of my superpower when I'm talking to people and recording them, and is to get them to forget the microphone and have them relax and say, I'm not going to ask you any questions you can't answer. If I do, just repeat it and just say,
I don't know.
Say, and I'll make you sound good. And then I can almost see the shoulders come down, and then they relax. And very often, like you said, I speak to Uber drivers or taxi drivers or people I meet on the street. I just bring my microphone up, and before they even think about it, we start having a conversation. I said, do you mind if I record this? And we just chat away. And I try not to do interviews, but more like have a conversation.
Right. And for those listening, this episode is brought to you by Hotels25.com. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, that's the...
if they go to Hotels25.com, what happens?
It searches all the big search sites in one simple search. So Hotels.com, Booking.com, Agoda...
It's a meta search engine.
Exactly. And and if you book through hotels25.com, I get a tiny commission. So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you deserve it, Palle Bo. Thank you so much. And any final words of wisdom? And where are you going to next? I'm looking at 2023. What's your goal here?
Oh, 2023, I have no idea. But
okay,
this
2022,
year,
the end of...
First, I'm going to Portugal now after Spain, and then I'm planning a trip in Africa, Togo, Benin, Ghana, Sao Tome, maybe Nigeria as well, if I can get all the visas in order. And
get the Nigerian visa before you leave.
Yeah.
You must.
Well, I heard from him. We'll talk about this off mic.
Get it before you leave. Trust me.
The Ghana one, I spoke to the embassy.
And Ghana, too.
I spoke to the consulate in Lisbon, and they said, "Oh, you need to go to Paris."
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
So, and I don't feel comfortable about sending my passport in the mail to Paris.
I know. But you listen. Trust me. As somebody who did to all 54 African countries, Ghana.
How many?
All 54 African countries. But anyway, so I've gone to all these visas. I got visa for Nigeria 3 times, twice because I had a connection. But once I didn't, and I had to wait 2 months for it. It was a real pain in the ass. It's very hard. But in Dakar, here's a little tip. You can in Dakar get the Ghana visa because they're a little bit. The embassy there is a little bit more lax. But in general, you can't get it on the road, and you can't get the Nigerian one on loan. That may have changed the politics. Maybe they're doing e-visas now. Maybe they've relaxed it, and that's possible. People should check it out. But seriously,
I did a fairly big Northwestern Africa tour, and I was in Rabat for a week just to collect visas because I got all of them. Yeah.
But just trust me, Ghana and Nigeria. Be careful about those. The other ones that you mentioned, they're fine to get on the road. But if you can,
but anyway,
just look into it.
Let's see if I can do it in 10 seconds. What happens after that? I'm doing a UK road trip with my kids, 2 weeks all around the UK, trying to hit all the countries there. And then I'm going to Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And from there, I'm seeing if I can get to Cape Town before Thailand. I know it's a bit of a detour, but
it's like a big detour.
And then after TBEX, maybe I'll stay in Thailand for a bit, and then see if I can make it down to New Zealand and Australia, maybe Fiji. That's just this year.
You truly are a vagabond. You win. Very good. Okay, and last thing, just tell the listeners where they can find your podcast. What's the name? It's Radio Vagabond.
It's called The Radio Vagabond. If you want it in English, if you want it in Danish, just do Radio Vagabond. But
say that in Danish.
Radio Vagabond. Radio Vagabond.
Radio Vagabond.
That's right.
All right.
But it's the Radio Vagabond and the RadioVagabond.com, and that's also where you'll find me on Instagram, and very soon on TikTok, I hope.
Pleasure, Palle Bo. It's an honor, and I look forward to seeing you all over the place in TBEX. And maybe we'll bump into each other somewhere else on this planet.
Yeah, and with all your travels as well, I need, before we leave here, I need to put you on the Radio Vagabond as well. So let's see if we can make that work.
Thank you. Cool.
And that ends this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we've talked about, go to WanderLearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is always my social media username. My website is ftapon.com. Do you want to leave me an anonymous voicemail where you can make a comment or ask a question? Then go to speakpipe.com/ftapon. Furthermore, if you'd like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. Now, 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.